of you. Thank you for coming. I'm Penny. I'm from Eisenhower Library, and above me or next to me, depending on your screen, is Olga, and she is going to be doing the program for you. And I think I'm just going to turn it over to Olga, and off you go.
Thank you, Penny. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you, everybody, for coming. My name is Olga Cardamone, and I'm a tour guide and art historian. I'm originally from St. Petersburg, Russia, which is the place that I will be showing you today. I currently live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I've been here for about 7 years now. And I'm very excited to show you virtually around my hometown. I think that St. Petersburg is culture-wise one of the most interesting places in Europe, at least. Because again, the rich culture and just a great vibe. I think that St. Petersburg is underrated in a way. We have a very rich history. We have a lot of wonderful views, and it's really expensive and very daunting to try to travel to Russia because of visa, the long flights, everything. And it's just so wonderful that one of the things that came out of COVID is this uprising of the popularity of virtual tours. So I'm very excited to be showing you around St. Petersburg. There is a reason why I note that I am in the US right now. It is safe for me to answer any of your questions without any censorship or anything like that. It's totally fine for me to speak my mind about anything, including current events. So if you have any questions about it, it's okay. Feel free to ask, and I will also answer at the end of the tour. I have to say, I am excited to be showing you this cultural and historic part of Russia because of what is going on right now and with the current political climate. Things are changing, and a lot of the views that we're going to see with you today were taken a while ago, a couple years ago, and some of the shops, some of the restaurants that you might notice in those views, they're not there anymore, unfortunately, because things are currently changing. Anyways, without further ado, I'm about to show you one of the beautiful bird's eye views of St. Petersburg. And my tour will have today more of a cultural and historic focus. So here we go. Here is a beautiful bird's eye view of St. Petersburg. Go full screen. And what you can see right now on your screens is the center of St. Petersburg. And at the very center of my beautiful city here is this large river. It's called the Neva. It's one of the biggest rivers in Russia. And the Neva is one of the major reasons why our city was founded to begin with. It is a very important waterway that connects us to the Baltic Sea. And you can see actually the Baltic Sea right here. St. Petersburg is located right on the shore of the Baltic Sea. To be precise, this is its part that is called the Gulf of Finland. And the foundation of St. Petersburg, which took place in 1703, changed pretty much the course of the Russian history. At that time, our country was being ruled by this revolutionary and true visionary Tsar or emperor, whose name was Peter the Great. And Peter the Great, he realized that the way that the country was developing at the time was not really leading anywhere. We were really lagging behind when compared to Europe in technological advancements and trade and a lot of these things. And Peter the Great realized that it's largely because we do not have access to the sea. And so he changed the situation and gave Russia access to the Baltic Sea and founded this gorgeous city on its shore. There's pretty much nothing here when Peter the Great started. And when you look at the way that our city is planned, you could probably notice that a lot of the streets are very straight. A fair amount of streets are pretty wide. And again, that is because there's pretty much nothing here. And our city was originally built according to a pretty strict plan. Peter the Great was he just really liked order, and he liked things to be very regular. Of course, the palaces and the mansions of the nobility of the time, they were built right on the shore of the Neva River. And the river itself is actually one of the most important sites of our city, that when people come to St. Petersburg, they try to stroll along the shore of the Neva. And one of the biggest reasons for that are the bridges that go across the river. You can see a couple right here already. And one of the major reasons why those bridges are so popular is because of the fact that they open. They open at night to let the big ships go through from the Baltic Sea and further down into down the river and to other countries. And I want to show you one of the views of a bridge today. And you today will actually get to see what it looks like when the bridge is open. Here is one of the bridges known as the Trinity Bridge. And you can already see here in this view why watching those bridges open, it's so attractive and so beautiful. Number one, those bridges are beautifully illuminated. Number two, as they open, it's always a really big deal. We have classical music playing and lots of people just crowd around the bridges to watch how they open, which is also quite nice. And then the city itself serves as a beautiful background for watching the opening bridges. For example, you could see one of our sites in the background. I promised to take you there today and tell you a little bit more about it later. I wonder if you are also noticing the beautiful color of the sky. And this is another interesting thing that is connected to the bridge watching experience, because the bridges open pretty late at night. Around 1 a.m. is when they open. And in the summer, this is what our sky looks like around 1 a.m. The thing is, St. Petersburg is pretty far north. And so we have what is called white nights. So in the summer, it almost never gets dark. It only maybe gets dark for a couple hours. And for the rest of the night, the sky has this really beautiful purplish, pinkish color, which really adds to it. And obviously, the closer to the summer solstice, the longer the days. And so the opposite of that is that in the winter, we almost have no light. The sun comes out around 11 a.m. and it already goes down around 4 or 5 p.m. So it's a very, very short day. However, we take full advantage of the summertime light. If you ever visit St. Petersburg in the summer, you'll see lots of people walking around and just enjoying the light. It's a wonderful place to be around the summer solstice, St. Petersburg. While amazingly beautiful for the visitors of the city, the bridges across the Neva can be quite a nuisance for the locals, because this is the only way to get across the river. And if you say we're partying at night here in downtown St. Petersburg, but you live where most people live, not in downtown, on the other side of the river, you really have to plan your night so that you either cross the river before 1 a.m. or you will have to stay downtown until about 5 a.m., which is when the bridges close. And as I said, everybody's out at night. St. Petersburg and a lot of big Russian cities are the kind of cities where restaurants, bars, and other places like that are open 24/7. So it is really easy to forget. And you can even see there's kind of already a crowd of cars gathering before the bridge. They barely didn't make it. Now they can't go across this bridge. But luckily for them, our bridges, they open at 10-minute intervals. So you can see, if you look back, all the way in the back, that bridge already opened. This one is just opening, and further down, that one is just beginning to open, or is about to open. It's kind of hard to tell. So you could race further down the river and try to cross, but most visitors do stay in downtown, so you probably won't have that problem if you stay here. But if that happened to you, if you're stuck in downtown St. Petersburg, there are lots of things to do. There are lots of sights to see. And actually, the first one that I want to show you is kind of already in the background over there. Let's get closer to it. One of the most beautiful buildings in St. Petersburg. Back in my guiding days, when I would spend several days showing people around St. Petersburg and ask them at the very end what was their favorite building, the majority of people named this beautiful church that is called the Church on Spilled Blood. And a lot of people don't forget to mention that it is quite a weird name for such a beautiful church. Why is it called the Church on Spilled Blood? What does it even mean? Well, the reason why it's called the Church on Spilled Blood is because one of the Russian monarchs at the end of the 19th century was assassinated here on the spot, and so his son decided to build a church on the spot where his father's blood was spilled, hence the name. And it's quite an interesting story. So the monarch, or the emperor, who died here, his name was Alexander II. And he is known as one of the most liberal of all Russian rulers in all of Russian history, not just monarchy. For example, he was the Russian Tsar who, in 1861, abolished serfdom, which is basically our equivalent of freed the slaves in Russia. He had a project of a Russian constitution. He really wanted to change the ways that politics were done. However, he was just very unlucky when it came to timing, because the left and the right people both had some sort of beef with him, because the people who were very conservative, of course, did not like his liberal reforms. However, the liberal people at the time, who had already traveled a lot and seen how things are done in Europe, they believed that he was not liberal enough. And in general, just the most liberal of them all thought that monarchy should not even be a thing anymore. In a lot of European countries, monarchy didn't exist anymore. So they decided, there was a group of people who were trying to attack the royal family and assassinate different members of the royal family. And it's hard to believe, but there were about 8 attempts to assassinate Alexander II, and only the last one was successful. So he was going down the shore of the canal here in a carriage when a terrorist came to him and threw a bomb at him. And the carriage exploded, and this is how that monarch died. And so, as I said, his son decided to build a church on this place where his father died. And his son was also quite an interesting person, because he was a big fan of all things Russian, traditional Russian culture. Because by the end of the 19th century, Peter the Great really changed it all in the early 18th century. By the end of the 19th century, the pendulum swung the other way. And we were really following and copying Europe in many different things, especially when it came to aesthetics. And for example, if you look around this cathedral, you can see this is what the majority of the buildings looked like around that time. And these are pretty much the kind of buildings that you would see in Paris or in Berlin at that time, or any other European city, because we were really following European fashion in that regard. And the Tsar, who ordered to construct this new church, he wanted things to be a bit different. And he really wanted the church that would commemorate his father to stand out. So there was a competition, and different architects could apply with their projects for a new church. And this one won, and it was proposed not by an architect, but by a priest. who got inspired by traditional ancient Russian architecture. There is a similar church in Moscow that you might have heard of called St. Basil Cathedral, with the same beautiful onion-shaped domes and the bright colors that decorate the facade and the domes of the church. I'm going to zoom in to give you an idea of what these towers and the decor of the walls look like. So the domes, as well as some of the roof decor, is made of enamel, beautiful enamel. And then another technique that is used here is mosaic technique. And especially most beautiful pieces of mosaics can be seen in these parts of the church here. You can see scenes from the Bible. You can see depictions of different Christian saints. And interestingly enough, in this little tower over here, the scenes from the Bible are actually surrounded with little squares, and these squares have in them coats of arms of different Russian cities and provinces. The reason it's done that way is because these people from these provinces donated money for the construction of the church. And so that was a way to thank them and to honor the fact that they helped construct it. Also, interestingly enough, this right here in this little chapel, in there is exactly the place where the emperor died. And that is why we have these coats of arms right there, sort of just to say that the people stand with the Tsar, or he is connected to the people. So they are close together there. Anyways, if the church seems really beautiful on the outside, well, wait till I show you the inside, because the inside is even more beautiful. So here we go. This is the inside view. And inside, the walls of the church are entirely covered with mosaic. So all these beautiful pictures that you see, they are all mosaics. On the walls, again, you can see depictions of different scenes from the Bible. As for the columns, or the semi-columns, you can see the depictions of different Orthodox saints. And again, this is all mosaic. Most of the mosaic pieces are made of glass. However, in the golden parts where we see the halos, for example, or other golden elements, these pieces of mosaic are made not just with glass, but also with real gold, with really thin layers of gold that is known as gold leaf. It's essentially thinner than human hair, even. And so it's baked in between two pieces of glass, and this is how those pieces of mosaic would be made. As I mentioned, Alexander II died at the very end of the 19th century, to be more precise, 1881. And the church took a while to build. It was finished in 1903. Altogether, altogether, it took more than 20 years to build the church. And when the church was completed, it immediately became not a place that would be visited by the public, but it became a private property of the royal family. So only they could attend service in this church, and they could invite other people to attend service, but you really did need a special invitation. It didn't get to be the private church of the royal family for a really long time. For if you know anything about the Russian history of the early 20th century, you have probably heard the date 1917. And in 1917, in Russia, we had a revolution. So it only was a private church of the royal family from 1903 to 1917. And then two big things happened that really affected the survival of this church next. Number one, as a result of the Russian Revolution, the royal family was overthrown. So it could not be their private church anymore. And then secondly, soon after, we became a new country, the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, the official views on religion were very different. If you wanted to be a member of the Communist Party, you could not be Christian. You had to be an atheist. Otherwise, you would not be accepted into the Communist Party. If you're not a member of the Communist Party, a lot of roads are closed for you in terms of career, for example. And so, as we were officially an atheist country, a lot of the churches in the country were either demolished or closed down. And interestingly enough, the new Soviet leaders were quite practical people. And instead of, just taking down these big buildings, they decided, why not just give them a different purpose? So a lot of these large churches started to serve as movie theaters, nightclubs. There was a church in the center of St. Petersburg. There was a swimming pool. This one became a storage. It was a storage at first for theater decorations, and then during World War II, when our city was attacked, it was called Leningrad then, it was surrounded by Nazi troops. It became a vegetable storage, and the locals even gave it the nickname the church and spilled potatoes because of the potatoes that were kept here. And as you can imagine, under such lack of care, the church was in dreadful state by about mid-20th century. The pieces of mosaic were missing from the walls. They were, whatever was left of the mosaic was just covered with a really thick layer of dirt, because the windows also were broken. So dust, snow, rain, everything would just go in. And just a lot of the pieces were just simply looted, because who wouldn't want a piece of marble for themselves? So marble, other semi-precious stones that were used for the decoration of the church were taken out. And so in around 1950s, there was a plan to blow it up and make a metro station here. Luckily, something good came out of Russian bureaucracy, because the project just kept passing, getting passed back and forth. It didn't happen until in 1970s, a new project was proposed. And with that project, they decided to do the opposite, to restore the church. The restoration took even longer than the construction. It was 27 years. Finally, in 1997, very recently, the church became available to the public. And so now it's a museum protected by the Ministry of Culture and taken really good care of. But we're going to go back outside and enjoy some more beautiful views. As I mentioned, the gorgeous church and spilled blood stands on the shore of a canal. And this canal leads further down into the main street of St. Petersburg. I'm really excited to show you this spot. We are now on the main street of St. Petersburg. The main street is called Nevsky Avenue, or another name is Nevsky Prospect. The word prospect means a really wide and long street, an avenue. And I really like this particular spot because from in here, everywhere you look, you see something beautiful. For example, right now, you're looking at a gorgeous shop. Originally, this early 20th century Art Nouveau building was constructed to be a shop for Singer sewing machines, and Singer companies sponsored the construction of the shop. On the first floor, they had a big store where people could come in and look at sewing machines, and the other floors were used for sales offices and things like that. The Singer company was quite popular in Russia in the 20th century, and lots, the majority of families owned that, iron Singer sewing machine, and so they were doing quite well. And the head of the Singer company was thinking of building a really large office here right on the main street. However, we had rules in the capital at that time. St. Petersburg was the capital, that nothing can be taller than the royal residence. So the building itself is, relatively low. However, they added this extra tower on top to still make it a bit taller than the royal residence. And the tower itself is quite interesting. There's a lot of sewing symbolism thrown around here. For example, the idea behind the shape of the tower is for the tower to look like a thimble. And there's even more sewing related details in the decor of the building. As I zoom in, you can see these two statues next to the large window, and the statues are holding sewing machines right there under their arms. As you can guess, this the Singer company did not get to stay in the country very long for the same reason as we just discussed. The Russian Revolution played a big role in it. Soon after the Russian Revolution, when we became the Soviet Union, a lot of privately owned businesses left the country, and a lot of the production became government controlled. And so the building was abandoned, but very soon became occupied by a bookstore. And since then, it has been the main bookstore of St. Petersburg, known as the House of Books. In fact, unfortunately, I'm so used to saying has been. During COVID, unfortunately, the House of Books closed down. But thanks to, after existing for decades and decades, but thanks to Google Virtual Views, we can have a quick glimpse of what it looks like inside. Back when I lived in St. Petersburg, this was one of my most favorite places to be. I just really like the Art Deco interior, and you can grab any book. And there are books in English as well as in Russian. And they had a wonderful cafe right here with some of the best tea, some of the best breakfast in St. Petersburg. And you could just bring a book with you and read and just put it back on the shelf. And one of the most amazing things about this little cafe was the view. You can see a little bit of the view from here, but I'm going to take you back outside and show you what you would be looking at if you were sitting by the window in this little cafe and enjoying your morning coffee and a book. This is the Singer store, and right here across the street is a beautiful, beautiful cathedral. Let's get closer to it. The name of this cathedral here is Kazan Cathedral, and it's called that in honor of an icon, the main icon inside of the cathedral, that is known as the icon of Our Lady of Kazan. Kazan is a town in Russia where that icon was found. It's believed to be a miraculous icon that makes people's wishes come true, and so people ask the icon to help them in different ways. And when I show people the inside view of the cathedral, and when we go inside, because that is the same always, people are always shocked by the long line of people standing there, but there's like no communion, there's no service going on. What are people standing here for? Well, they are standing in line to touch, see, or even kiss the miraculous icon. I will zoom in a little bit so that you can see how small this icon of Virgin Mary and Infant Christ next to it is. And you can also see a congregation of people that are lining up to see it. The women are wearing headscarves. Men are required to take off their hats. These are the rules of Russian Orthodox churches, for the main religion in Russia is Orthodox Christianity. And this church is a great illustration of some other rules about Orthodox churches. For example, if you look at the large space of the church, you might notice that there are no pews here. And the rule is that in the Russian Orthodox Church, you're not allowed to sit. That is considered disrespectful to God. So you are supposed to either stand or kneel during the service. The rules are a little bit more relaxed right now, and there are a couple stools here and there for people who really just can't stand for a long time, because some of our services can be quite long. For example, the Easter service, Christmas service can be hours and hours long, and people do stand during those services. Another interesting thing is that there are no musical instruments allowed inside churches. Mostly we have the choir that sings, and that creates a wonderful atmosphere inside the church. Finally, even though we do have services, and oftentimes the services are not sermons, they're mostly the choir singing and the congregation and the priest singing the prayers together. A lot of people can just come into the church whenever they please and have their own experience with the icons, which we have a lot of in different nooks and crannies inside the church. I want you to notice this beautiful wall, kind of that separates the space of the church. When we are standing in one space, behind the wall is another space. We will be talking about this sort of wall, which is crucial to a Russian Orthodox church when we see a couple more churches during our tour today. But now we will go back outside. We are again on the main street of St. Petersburg, Nevsky Prospect or Nevsky Avenue. And another gorgeous part of Nevsky Avenue is where we have our beautiful royal residence. Let me show you that. Our royal residence, former royal residence, I should say, is located on the main square of St. Petersburg that is known as the Palace Square. At the very center of the square, you have this beautiful column with the figure of an angel with a cross on top. The name of the column is a Alexander's column, and it's named that in honor of another Alexander. We talked about Alexander II a little bit. This one is in honor of Alexander I. He was the Tsar who ruled our country when we were at war with Napoleon, and he defeated Napoleon. This column was put here to commemorate that victory. It's believed that the angel with the cross is a guardian angel of the city that protects the city from possible invasions. And I mean, I have to say it's been true since that angel was put up there, even though our city did did suffer from attacks, it was never conquered. The angel tramples on a snake, which symbolizes the enemy, and points at the cross, which sort of is a symbol of the righteousness of the actions of the Russian army. Again, the current events are giving it all a whole new context, but this is why it was put up here to begin with. Another interesting fact about the column is that the giant piece of marble here stands there just by the power of its own weight. Nothing holds it in place. And even though this column has been here for over 200 years, it has never fallen down. Of course, at first, when this column was put up here, people were scared to walk around it. But the architect who chose to put it there, he was so sure that it was perfectly safe that every morning he would walk his dog around the column, and neither him nor the dog suffered any injuries. Anyways, on the opposite side of the column, here is the true main attraction of the square. The reason why it's called the Palace Square or the Palace. The name of the palace is the Winter Palace. And it was the winter or cold time of year residence of our former royal family. Yes, they did have summer residences too, which were mostly in the countryside. And during the cold time of year, they stayed here in the Winter Palace. The palace was built here by an order of Russian Empress Elizabeth. She was the daughter of Peter the Great, the guy who founded our city. And Peter the Great was quite an interesting person. While he lived on a very large scale when it came to political changes and making important historic decisions, he was a really brave man. But in his personal life, he was a true minimalist, an 18th century minimalist. He liked to live in small spaces. He liked to own very few things. And in general, he lived a very simple life, like eating simple foods and things like that. And so he raised his kids in a similar manner, in a very minimalistic manner, so to say. And so people believe that when his daughter, Empress Elizabeth, got on the throne, this was her way to like make up for all those years of life with the father minimalist because she was definitely the opposite. She loved luxury. She wanted large spaces. She wanted Baroque dresses and balls and elaborate meals. And so she asked her court architect, this amazing Italian artist, to build her this large, grand palace. And that would consist of over 1,000 rooms. And that architect really achieved the task because he built this palace in just less than 8 years, which is incredible. Only 8 years it took. Think about the Church of Spilled Blood. That took over 20 years. This large palace took just 8 years to build. But unfortunately, the commissioner, Empress Elizabeth, never got to live there because she died before it was completed. So the first resident of the palace was her niece-in-law. It was Catherine the Great. Catherine the Great, she was a German princess. She married into the Russian royal family, and she moved into the palace with her husband. She had her own wing of the palace, which was right here, the wing that is now covered with scaffolding. And amazingly, when she moved in, she immediately, or soon after she became an empress, she ordered to add an extra wing to the palace. And you can see this wing right here. Why did she need that extra wing? Well, this was the place where she placed her art collection. She loved art, and she purchased a small art collection for this from this German businessman and placed it there in the newly built pavilion, which had a passage. The wing of the Winter Palace and the little addition had a passage, so she could go there and she could look at her art. And yes, she did show it to some guests, but she also just really loved going there alone and enjoying her collection. And she used to say, only mice and me get to see my art. Because she was alone there so much, kind of like a hermit, she called this place my hermitage. And later, as the next generations of the royal family collected more and more art, this grew and grew and grew and became known as the Hermitage Museum. Back in the day when the Russian monarchy was still alive, the museum was sort of a part of their residence, and only people who had a special invitation could come and see it. And by mid-19th century, it already occupied 2 buildings. This one, the original one, and the one next to it that is known as the New Hermitage. But after the Russian Revolution, both Hermitage buildings and the Winter Palace became property of the state, and art became available to the general public. People were able to go in and check it out. And I am a huge fan of the Hermitage Museum. It's one of my most favorite places in the entire world. I have spent days and weeks there. And I think that in the Hermitage, we have an incredible collection, starting with like things like the oldest carpet in the world and all the way up to maybe not the most contemporary, but some contemporary art. And we have some incredible artists in there. Today is not a tour of the Hermitage. I do have a separate tour of the Hermitage, but I want to show you at least one of the interiors of the Hermitage today. I will take you to see the first interior that people would see when they entered the Winter Palace. The first interior that people would see when they came here to visit the royal family. And you still get to see it when you come to the Hermitage. That is the main staircase, which you can see right now. This main staircase is the only Baroque interior of the whole palace because Elizabeth, who originally ordered to build it, she loved Baroque. It just suited her nature so much. But Catherine the Great, she had a different taste. Plus, she didn't have a really good relationship with her predecessor, so she ordered to change a lot of things. But this Baroque staircase was just so perfect for greeting guests, for being the first thing that people see when they come in. So here we go. That's what they would see. For example, these beautiful gilded wood carvings on the walls. Again, it's covered with a really thin layer of gold called gold leaf. That is, again, thinner than human hair, has to be replaced and restored on a regular basis even now. Or look at this beautiful marble railing. This marble railing comes from Italy, from Carrara, which is where they believe to have the whitest marble in the world. And we have a fair amount of Carrara marble here on the staircase. And when the guests of the royal family went even further up, they would see other remarkable details, like these large windows that overlook the Neva River, or you see these mirrors that sort of duplicate the windows and make the space look even larger. There are these beautiful granite columns here. And if you look all the way up to the ceiling, you would see this gorgeous ceiling painting that is called Gods of Olympus. And it depicts all of the gods of Olympus. The idea behind the painting is that when gods of Olympus heard that the royal family would have such important guests, they all gathered in the sky to greet them. So we can now imagine that gods of Olympus are greeting us here at the Hermitage Museum. Anyways, we are going to go back outside because we still have a couple more buildings to see. And the next building that I want to show you, we can see from the square right here. Another gorgeous church with a large gilded dome. Let's come closer to it. The church is called St. Isaac's Cathedral, and it is a mid-19th century creation. At that time, it was Catherine the Great's grandchildren that were ruling the country. And if we come back, if we remember how it all started, how Russia was sort of really isolated in the early 18th century, and Peter the Great was the one who changed everything and made Russia truly a part of Europe. By mid-19th century, St. Petersburg, which was Russia's capital at that time, became a really important political and economic center in Europe. And people from all over Europe would move to St. Petersburg to work here. Of course, because of the industrial changes that were going on, people from the rest of the country were also trying to move into St. Petersburg. And so the city was rapidly growing. At that time, we had some really small churches here in the city, and it was time to build a truly large, spacious, beautiful main cathedral, and that would fit a lot of people at the same time. So the ruler at the time, his name was Nicholas I, ordered to construct a large cathedral, and St. Isaac's Cathedral was built here, and it was built to fit over over 3,000 people at the same time. We're going to go inside and see a beautiful piece of decor of St. Isaac's Cathedral that is called the iconostasis, or the icon wall. If you remember, in the previous church, I showed you the wall as well that separates the main part of the church from the rest of the cathedral. And so here we are in St. Isaac's Cathedral. This large wall with icons is known as the iconostasis. And it's a really crucial part of a Russian Orthodox Church. It separates the main part where the congregation is from the sacred part where the altar is, and only the priests are allowed to go. In the center of the iconostasis, there is a door known as the Holy Door. And normally, the Holy Door is open during the service so the congregation can have a little glimpse at the altar and what's behind there. St. Isaac's Cathedral is not a working church at the moment. It's a museum, so this door is always open, and that gives us a chance to look at the beautiful decor there behind the wall. I want to zoom in and show you this gorgeous stained glass piece. In the middle of the 19th century, stained glass in Russia was not a truly Russian craft. This was a kind of craft that we lost during the Mongolian invasion centuries ago. It was never really revived. However, if you think about the country that is known for their stained glass, some people might think France with their beautiful Gothic cathedral and their colorful stained glass. Well, this architect who built St. Isaac's Cathedral, he was French. And he added this gorgeous stained glass here in his design. The story of this architect, whose name was Auguste Montferrand, is also quite interesting. He proposed the project of the cathedral to the emperor when he was very young. He was only 18 years old. There were a lot more experienced architects that were proposing projects too, but Montferrand was the most ambitious. He was willing to fulfill all the conditions that the emperor had. For example, there was an old cathedral on that spot, and the emperor wanted to keep some of the parts of the old church there. Older, more experienced architects said it would not be possible. Montferrand said, yes, it's possible, of course. As the process went on, he ended up changing his mind, but it was too late. Anyways, the emperor agreed to let him build the church, and it took 40 years of his life, the construction of this church, which is quite incredible. 40 years until the church was completed. And so the stained glass that you see here had a marvelous effect in the middle of the 19th century. Because right now the church is really well illuminated with electricity, but back in the day on a regular Tuesday, it was pretty dark inside. There was only candlelight here. And the way that the stained glass was placed, it really made it look like you were in the dark and Jesus was like this light at the end of the tunnel. Which is quite beautiful. I read that in somebody's memoirs, and that just made me think of, oh, how I wish I saw that in the middle of the 19th century. But now the fact that the church is so beautifully illuminated gives us a chance to really appreciate and see all the beautiful details of it that we can see so well. So, for example, this is the larger part of the church that we haven't seen yet. And you can see the walls that are decorated with marble. A lot of this marble came from Italy. Some of it is local as well. And you can see the ceiling that is beautifully decorated with frescoes. Lots of Russia's prominent artists worked on this beautiful ceiling. I want to zoom in a little bit more and show you the center of the ceiling, where you can see the fresco of Virgin Mary and the 12 apostles looking at this white dove right here. The dove symbolizes the Holy Spirit, and it's a sculpture actually that is hanging from the top of the church. It looks small from here, but the wingspan of this dove is 2 meters, about 6 feet, if I'm not mistaken. It's made of wood and is covered with silver plates, so they beautifully reflect light and create this impression of a white dove. Interestingly enough, I started telling you about what other churches were during the Soviet times, and like I said, some were storage, some were swimming pools. This one, I think, beats them all, because inside this church, they had an museum of anti-religious museum of atheism. And basically inside here, they had different posters and exhibits that would explain why science should dominate over religion. It's like that. They had different scientific experiments here. And yes, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it got changed back into just the church the way it was, so we can see it, what it was like in the 19th century. Another attraction, a really important part of the church, is its colonnade, and people really like to go up the colonnade. It's quite a long staircase, about 300 steps, but when you go up, and there's no elevator, but when you go up, you see one of the best views in the city. For example, this is one of the major squares in the city, at the head of which is the City Hall, St. Petersburg City Hall. This brown building with red awning is one of St. Petersburg's oldest hotels, known as the Astoria Hotel. If you ever find yourself in St. Petersburg, I highly recommend going there for 5 o'clock tea. And in the colonnade, you can go around, so you can see all the different views. For example, you can see a little bit of the Hermitage Museum there, and you can see across the river over there is a beautiful island. We started with, we saw that island in the very beginning of our tour, when we were looking at the bridge that was opening, and that little island was on the background. So I'm going to take you to that island to show you actually the place where our city started. This is one of the oldest constructions in St. Petersburg. Inside the island, and the island itself is known as Peter and Paul's Fortress. St. Petersburg was founded as a result of a war with Sweden. So it was originally a little fort where people lived. It was a little town within the fortress walls. And when people lived inside the fortress walls, they needed a little church to go and attend service. And so this church was constructed right here, known as Peter and Paul's Cathedral. And now Peter and Paul's Cathedral plays a huge role in just the culture of St. Petersburg. First of all, it's the oldest church in the city. Second of all, it is a very important part of St. Petersburg's skyline, because this cathedral with its spire is the tallest building in the city center. And the idea is that you should be able to see it from every point in the city center. Finally, this cathedral is also the burial place of the Russian royal family, starting with Peter the Great and all the way up to the last Romanovs. So we're going to now go inside the church and explore its interior, as well as some of the tombs. So here we are now inside the church. And in my mind, the decor of the church is very different from what we are used to seeing in traditional Russian Orthodox churches. It's not as bright. The architect used these really calm pastel colors. I think it was an homage to European churches, because Peter wanted everything to be as close to Europe as possible. We also had to be really thrifty and inventive when it came to the decor, because I want to remind you, there was like literally nothing here when the city was founded. Delivering a lot of the materials here would be expensive, and there was a lot going on at the time. So what they did, these columns, for example, they look like marble. They're actually painted to imitate marble. Another interesting solution that was used here was in this wall. Remember, that's the wall with icons. In the previous cathedral, we saw how huge and monumental it can be. In this cathedral, it's really light. It's very elaborate. It's made of wood. It was made of wood in Moscow and then delivered to St. Petersburg by parts, where then it was put together like this big Lego here inside the cathedral, and then it was covered with gold leaf, which is what you can see here. A beautiful gold leaf. Another interesting detail here that stays in the church is this canopy that is known as a Tsar's place. So during the service, this is where the Tsar used to stand and pray. The Tsar was also not allowed to sit, just like everybody else, but at least they got to stand under their own canopy. And the tombs, as I promised. So as I said, the members of the royal family, starting with Peter the Great, are all buried here. And you can see the tomb of Peter the Great. You can see a bust of Peter the Great. Next to him, there's a laurel wreath and medals that were placed on the tomb. All these things were made here, were put here to just symbolize, to signify the importance of Peter the Great, how important he was to the history of our city. He's buried next to his wife, Catherine I. That is also quite an interesting story. She was a laundress from Sweden, and she came to Russia, and then one of Peter's courtiers introduced her to him. It was love at first sight, and they had many kids. Only one of them became the ruler of Russia. You can see her here, Elizabeth, Empress Elizabeth. She was the one for whom the Winter Palace was constructed. Behind her, we can see the tomb of Catherine the Great, who ruled after her, shortly after her husband, Peter III, who was the nephew of Elizabeth. And so these were the first Romanovs that are buried here and that ruled in St. Petersburg. At the other end of this wall, we can see the last Romanovs that ruled the country. In this chapel is the burial place of the last Russian royal family, the family of Nicholas II, the last Russian Tsar. You might have heard some things about him and his wife and their 5 kids. They ruled in the late 19th, early 20th century, where a lot of things in Russian society were changing. People wanted more freedoms in terms of politics, in terms of personal rights. And unfortunately, Nicholas II was not willing to give them those freedoms. He lived with the idea that he was anointed by God and he should be the sole ruler. The idea that ended up not working out here in Russia, especially because he took part in some really devastating wars. Like World War I was terrible for us. There was a Russian-Japanese war that we lost. And ultimately, he really lost popularity to the point that the whole family was overthrown by a revolutionary party. They were kept under house arrest for a while, taken much deeper into the country to Siberia and then to the Ural region, which was where they got assassinated, the whole family in one night. Nicholas, his wife, their 5 kids. And another horrible thing about it is that when they got assassinated, they didn't even get buried. The bodies were just thrown into one of the mines there. And for a while, people really did not know what happened to the last royal family. And that really gave origin to all the stories that you might have heard about this or that member surviving, the most popular of those probably being Princess Anastasia. However, in the late 20th century, the bodies were discovered. And later, even thanks to the technological advances, DNA tests were held. And it was proven that all the members of the last royal family were in that coal mine where they were discovered, and they were all buried in here. So they're actually buried underground. The sarcophagus there stands for the whole family, and then on the walls you can see memorial plaques for each member of the family, and even one for their servants as well. There were some really loyal servants that stayed with the family till the end. And so on this note, this is the last thing I wanted to share with you today. I'm still absolutely happy to answer questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. I see that there is one in there already, so I'm going to go ahead and answer it. I see a message that that one of you have visited St. Petersburg, and the question whether I think tourism will again be possible. Great question. I sincerely hope that it will be possible someday. I think that St. Petersburg has just so much to offer. It's so wonderful. If anybody asked me today if you should go and visit St. Petersburg, though, I would say absolutely not. I don't think it's safe to go there right now. So I think there have to be some changes made until people can feel safe enough to visit. And I surely hope that it will happen in our lifetime. Hopefully sooner than later, because I think it deserves a visit.
Wonderful. What's the population of St. Petersburg?
Right now, the population is 5 million people. Yeah, it's a pretty big city. It's the second largest in Russia after Moscow, which has 12. I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but I think that what you're probably referring to is that whether the city was built by Ukrainian people that were sent there from their homes. Yes, at some point in history, the country that is now Ukraine and should be independent and left alone was a part of Russia, and people from all over the country were sent to the capital to build the city. Absolutely, there was a lot of forced labor used in the construction of the city under the rule of Peter the Great, especially, but there was nothing in there, and they needed a lot of people to help build the city. So this is absolutely something that would not happen today. But yes, they used the labor of people from all over the country back in the day.
Oh, the best way to visit the mosaics, websites, and books.
Well, there is a lot. If you just Google them, like if, for example, if you're talking particularly about the Church on Spilled Blood or St. Isaac's Cathedral, I can put in the chat of what they are called. So the first one we saw was called the Church on Spilled Blood. And the second one was called St. Isaac's Cathedral. And if you Google them, lots of great websites. Oh, you know what? I did just message, I think.
No, if you're, I think you're in chat. You're good. I
Oh,
think
okay. The Hermitage has an incredible website. If you want to see more of that, and if you just go on their website, you can see lots of great virtual views. And if you want to learn more about Russian culture, I wanted to show you really quickly that I have a YouTube channel with lots of free resources. Sorry. Trying to.
While you're pulling that up, I want to say my favorite thing was the bookstore, the House of Books.
Oh yeah. I'm so
great.
glad to hear that. That it's such a shame that it's not there anymore, but it used to be a wonderful place to be. Anyways, this is my YouTube channel. I have lots of free resources there, videos about Russia, and not only Russia, because I recently switched more of an art history focus because I want to focus on that a bit more right now. And I do a monthly free talk related to art history. And then I also have lots of videos, both about just art and about Russia. You can see videos about Russian history here. And if you go to live, you can see lots of free talks that I have scheduled pretty much for the whole year. So you can check them out, as well as the recordings of some other free tours that I did. I have 3 over here in the bottom, so you can check them out. Again, it's called Art and History with Olga Cardamon. I'll put that in the chat as well if you are interested.
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Then someone else, while you're putting that in, else. Oh, the book, The Madonnas of the Hermitage.
Yeah, it's a great book that a lot of people read before they come to St. Petersburg. It's a wonderful resource. It's about the people who worked at the Hermitage during World War II. And I mean, yeah, I think I've heard of the book. I haven't personally read it, but a lot of guests of mine absolutely loved it and recommended it. So if you are interested in reading it, I say definitely do it. I think it's a very entertaining read.
Okay, I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming.
Thanks, Penny. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Bye.